sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the Friday weekend edition. We certainly appreciate the fact that you've joined us today. A little bit later, we will open up the phones to give you a chance to join that conversation. And I might just mention in studio with today, Dr. Merrill Matthews, public policy analyst, individual that writes for The Hill and a variety of other places. Kelly Shackelford, president, CEO, and chief counsel for First Liberty Institute. Last week, of course, Dr. Matthews, you actually hosted the show. I was coming back from Georgia. And, of course, you had some comments, obviously, about Charlie Kirk. You may want to have some, but this may be the first time, and I know some of our listeners are looking forward to hearing the comments from Kelly Shackelford about his dear friend, Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's, my typical response the whole week is I felt sad and angry, kind of a mix from back and forth. The statement I released about an hour or so after his death said that for those who think that evil violence like this that's going to accomplish, shutting down your opponent or winning something, I said 100 more will rise in Charlie's place. And a week or so later now, I actually think I totally undershot that. But I knew that's what happens, right? I mean, God's not going to have one of his spokesperson not replaced and multiplied. That's what God does. But I just thought back a lot during the week, some pictures and things back. I mean, almost, I guess, 10 years ago when I met Charlie and when he was really just starting. And, he's an amazing guy. And he was always very bright, very on the go, very entrepreneurial. My wife and I went and visited Turning Point early on, and she was so blown away by all these, and she loves being with younger people. She was like, I want to work here. I'm like, you're too old. You can't do that. But it's just amazing what he built. And as we were talking this week, I said, as I look at some of these, discussions on college campuses, et cetera, look, Charlie was smart. He was very gifted. He read a lot. But the answers he gave a lot of times at these events were way beyond what anybody his age, I don't care what your reading was, what your biblical ingestion was. This is what I told my wife. I said, I really think, God obviously knew Charlie was going to be here 31 years, and he just gifted him with something way beyond his ability. Because there was really nobody that I know of, even in the world, who could handle these debates like he did. Really with patience. You think of debates of trying to get the other guy. That, and I've always hated that because that doesn't really work. Right? The audience is listening, and if you're taking somebody down, they feel bad for the person. And Charlie could have taken somebody down, but he didn't do that. He was more walking along with them. He was explaining if they had a different opinion. He was gracious, but he explained why he thought that they weren't on the right position. And he always talked about Jesus. And I think it's fitting that the last question he was able to answer before he was killed was talking about Jesus Christ and his faith and what it means to be a Christian. And so I was trying to think, people say once in a generation. I think once and forever. There's just been nobody like him. And again, to see what's happening now all across the country. I mean, over and over again on social media, you see people, young people, who have never opened a Bible that opened it this week, who have never been to church, but they went this week. And I see this all as part of something bigger because we've been fighting for religious liberty, and I've been wondering why we're winning all these big cases, because it's moving so quickly in a good direction. And as I've watched, for the first time ever, more young men going to church than young women. It's got to be the first time ever. The Barna deal a week ago, the largest church attendance in our country right now are the Gen Zs and the millennials, not the older people.
That's true.
When has that ever happened?
Yeah, never.
Right? And we could just go through these stats. 300% increase in church attendance by Gen Z. Something is going on, right? I mean, I think we're at the beginning of a third great awakening, and Charlie was part of that, and a key part of that, and God used him in that. And so I think we're just the beginning of something. And to watch this multiplication that's happening right now because of Charlie's death, it's one of his favorite verses, as he said, it's Romans 8:28. That God can take evil and he can work it. He can use that and move it towards good, and that's exactly what he's doing right now.
I just mentioned the funeral is Sunday. We'll probably play a clip of it on Monday. And Dr. Matthews, just any thoughts as well before we go to a break?
Well, Kelly mentioned the change. For the last decade, we've been talking about how colleges have been sort of corrupted by the liberal left, and have, people, Riley Gaines, trying to go and give a speech and had to run away, hide, and so forth. People who were just speeches that were shut down because of the left. And our concern was what was happening on the colleges, and Charlie began to turn that around in a way that we would not have, I don't think, predicted, because we thought this was going to continue. And now things seem to have turned in an opposite direction, and there are a lot of forces behind that, but I think you have to give a leading stance to Charlie Kirk for doing that. And we may at some point here in the next few years say, my goodness, the right has taken over on the college campuses. I'd be surprised if that happens, but
me too.
It might come about.
Yeah, again, we've seen some changes certainly in the political realm, and recognize again some of the changes need to take place in the cultural realm. But we do need to take a break, and let me just mention that we do have a lot of information we're going to get to. One of those is a piece that came out from Wall Street Journal. Pam Bondi needs a free speech tutorial. We want to hear a little bit from a First Liberty expert across the table here. Also one that was recommended by Merrill Matthews. Workers are getting fired over posts mocking Charlie Kirk's death. And maybe we'll even get into this one from the FCC about Jimmy Kimmel, and, of course, a variety of other topics that we will be covering today. So if you'd like to join the conversation a little bit later, we'll open up the phones. We'll also get into some of these religious liberty issues, because there have been some vigils, but it turns out at least one city in the state of Tennessee says, no, you can't host a prayer vigil on public property, and Kelly has had some comments about that as well. So I think you're going to find this to be a very interesting program. Later, of course, we'll give you a chance to express your opinions, and of course we would love to hear from you, not only through the phone calls but through the emails and a variety of other resources. So stay tuned. We're going to come back and get into some of these very important issues, including our Viewpoints commentary today by Penna Dexter, as well as a video that we've posted, the speech that Charlie Kirk gave at Point of View's 50th anniversary gala. All that coming up right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Lots of myths around the millennial generation. We even spend some time on radio during our Millennial Roundtable debunking many of them. Perhaps the most significant prevailing myth is that millennials are broke. Sociologist Jean Twenge takes on the myth of the broke millennial in her extensive article in The Atlantic. This isn't just a myth that others have about the generation. It is a myth they have about themselves. One author complains about their plight in her book, Okay, Boomers, Let's Talk, How My Generation Got Left Behind. She says her generation is responding with desperation and sometimes anger. Now, to her surprise, Jean Twenge responds, millennials as a group are not broke. They are, in fact, thriving economically. That wasn't true a decade ago, and prosperity within the generation today is not evenly shared. But since the mid-2010s, millennials on a whole have made a breathtaking financial comeback. The Great Recession 2008 was hard on American incomes, especially young millennials who were just entering the job market. But the millennial income rebound has been both broad and steep. Two groups that have not done well are men and people with less education. Millennial men have not seen their income increases that millennial women enjoy, in part because of a gap in educational attainment. That points to the other gap, the income gap between millennials with a college degree and those with only a high school degree. In one of his commentaries, John Stonestreet explains that the true crisis for millennials isn't a financial one, it's a crisis of meaning and purpose. Once again, this is where the gospel provides the answer. The Bible provides a true foundation for meaning and purpose. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Inflation, go to viewpoints.info/inflation. That's viewpoints.info/inflation. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again in studio with us today, Kelly Shackelford, Merrill Matthews. I might just mention, just in a few minutes, we'll probably get to some of the things that Kelly Shackelford can share, because you might remember last week we did do some coverage of the Second Religious Liberty Commission, and that was something that took place in the Museum of the Bible, and I think he can give us some inside look, also letting us know ahead of some of the other issues they're going to be covering, and we'll get into some of the religious liberty issues. But I thought I'd start off with a First Amendment issue, and that is the editors of the Wall Street Journal put it this way, Kelly, is a basic understanding of the First Amendment too much to expect from the nation's Attorney General? Progressives have been trying to create and define a category called hate speech. Then they go through and talk about how Kelly, as well as, certainly Charlie Kirk and all sorts of other people over the years say there's really not a category of hate speech in the First Amendment. And yet she said, we will absolutely target you, go after you if you're targeting anyone with hate speech. The First Amendment allows you to say anything you want, and there are very few limits on that. And there's really no category of hate speech, is there?
No. Now, I do think they've been a little unfair to Attorney General Bondi, because she's a lot of times when I've seen the quotes, when she says hate speech, she follows that with something like that leads to threats of violence. Yeah. So threats of violence are not protected. But just speech, just because it's hateful, is certainly protected. I mean, in fact, that's why we have a First Amendment.
That is right.
Is because some people hate what other people are saying, and we want to make sure that they have the right to say it. So I see a lot of this stuff going on. There's a lot of something we're going to talk about later about civics and teaching civics around our country and stuff like that. There's a lot of people that just don't even have the most basic understanding of some of these principles. They mix up the right of somebody to say, well, I don't like your speech, so I'm going to do this to you. I'm going to, you're not welcome in my home. Well, we're not going to pay you to work for us if you're going to say that. Is not free speech. You don't have free speech against nobody. Everybody has to go clap what you say. Okay. Free speech is the government cannot punish you for what you say. that distinction is being missed a lot with the Jimmy Kimmel situation and all that. And it's a very important distinction. So, and of course, the ultimate irony of all ironies is these people that are much more worked up about Jimmy Kimmel, which is not really a free speech situation, but much more worked up on that than the murder of Charlie Kirk for his free speech. And so it's just ironic to watch and to go, number one, you don't even know what it is, but number two, you don't seem to really care that much about it. It seems to be much more about something political than about the principle.
It does seem to me, Dr. Matthews, that maybe the lesson here is, whether it's the Attorney General or some of our listeners, be careful how you use words like hate speech. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And of course, as Kelly points out, you can't advocate violence. So that's not considered free speech.
We got that.
But in the private sector, various companies have the ability to allow people to speak or not speak. And so people can call in here and we may or may not put them on the air, and that's not squelching their free speech.
Yes.
That's our making an editorial judgment on something. And the same thing's true with newspapers and others. So people frequently get this free speech thing, as Kelly points out, mixed up, thinking we have free speech, therefore I can say anything I want anywhere. And that is really referring to the government.
Yes. And, look, we had a Supreme Court case on this. I think it was handled very poorly.
I was wondering to get to that.
Under the Biden administration,
there you go. Yes.
Where they threatened a bunch of these social media outlets, and they censored people. Now, to me, that was a violation of the First Amendment. But the Supreme Court went into some sort of semantics. They just didn't want to deal with the issue. And so they went into semantics where they said, well, although the threat did come and they did take it down, we're not totally sure it couldn't be another reason that they took it down. And I'm like, you can't.
John Roberts.
That's not the way it works. No. That's come on. When the government comes and threatens somebody specifically and then they censor somebody because of it, I mean, the government's fingerprints are all over that. And so that's a little different, obviously, but it's the government. It's the government. I mean, the Constitution is there to protect you against the government, not from other citizens. And so that mix up, we have a free market economy and speech, right? And so if somebody is on TV and they say something, if you don't like what they say and you're the employer, you could take them off. That's not a free speech violation. They don't have a right to your platform. If they want to go do their own platform, welcome to them. That's what the free exchange of ideas is. But it's about the government not taking away or censoring somebody.
Well, that's why I put that second article. Workers are getting fired over post mocking Charlie Kirk's death. And yes, they are. And every time you hear this free speech argument, well, no. American Airlines, NASDAQ, United Airlines, Delta Airlines, maybe even Alaska Airlines. I mean, that's one of the cases Kelly's talked about.
And what I thought was interesting about that article is we have been concerned for several years about the wokeness of the corporation.
Yes,
corporations that were like, well, we've got to bend the needle and go along with what the woke people want us to do. So whether it's Target with their clothes or Budweiser with their beer and things of that nature. And we felt like, corporations, stay out of this. Just stay out of this. Don't get political with what you're doing. Serve your customers, and your customers can be a wide swath of people. And what's happening now is corporations have apparently gotten that message. Whether they've gone too far, I don't know. I'm not commenting on that. But they are now looking over, and various employees are saying things that are just insensitive, inappropriate, and so forth. They're either shutting them down or letting them go. And so the corporations have said, essentially, apparently have come back and said, we don't want to be political here, and we don't want our people being political, at least as it's perceived to affect us as well. What I did think was interesting about the end of that article was it pointed out that a lady who had nothing to say about Charlie Kirk ended up, somebody had put her picture with a bad quote, and she ended up getting punished punished for that, and she was able to prove that wasn't her. But you could also have now people taking pictures of you, taking slides, some picture of you, putting a bad quote, and now you get punished for something you didn't actually do.
Yeah, false accusations. And I raised that question the other day because you could have somebody that would posted something that was maybe a family member, but they used your particular address or something of that nature. And this particular woman, Cynthia Rayberg, is an associate principal of Wisconsin Elementary School. Someone posted her picture on X with something that was not what she would want to say, which is a nice way to say the fact it was pretty despicable. And then just all the things that come crashing down on your head.
Yeah.
That's like doxing.
Add AI to that, too.
Yes.
You can do that, too. So
I think it's worth considering. Let's take the other aspect of that, and that was in the first article here. You have a decision that was made for a while by the group at Office Depot not to print a Charlie Kirk vigil poster. That's in Kalamazoo, of all places. And, of course, again, they're free to do that if they want. Now, corporate said that was a really bad idea, but that's the case. And the argument I used the other day is, anybody ever heard of Jack Phillips or any of these other situations in which there's been, if you will, a threat saying you have to bake this cake, you have to produce this website, you have to take this picture, or if you don't, we're going to actually ruin your life. And it seems to me that that's an issue there as well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you pointed out in another piece about Charlie Kirk and Starbucks, where people have said, sort of recognize him, they would order what Charlie Kirk would order, and then they'd say, what's your name? And they'd say, Charlie Kirk. And some of the Starbucks people didn't want to do that. But in fairness to the Starbucks people, Starbucks had said, don't get political. And so if you're a barista and you're thinking, okay, now is this getting political or is it not? And Starbucks apparently came up and said, it's not political. You can put down Charlie Kirk or you can say Charlie on those things.
Look, it's kind of simple. And it's kind of easy. This kind of works to us, our advantage, because we're Christians. But what Christian, no Christian that's living their life right is ever going to rejoice in somebody's death. Never. And I
can't even imagine that. Even if it was somebody we around the table disliked passionately, I can't even imagine doing
You know,
that.
the thing that came to my mind when I thought of that was the pictures I still have in my mind when 9/11 occurred.
Yeah.
And they had those cameras on a number of these Muslim people overseas that were all celebrating. And I thought, no Christian would ever do that, ever.
October 7 also.
Yeah. And then we do see some, and some of them are very high-profile individuals. But when we come back, I did want to talk about a liberal that said the right thing but got in trouble for it. We'll be right back.
America's founding was shaped by a biblical worldview, but you will rarely hear that truth today. Think about this. If your child or grandchild was asked to articulate how Christian values shaped America's founding based on the education they received in school and from popular media, could they do it? Well, you can be part of restoring an appreciation for America's godly heritage, and we need you. Truth Team Week is right around the corner, kicking off September 22nd, and you're invited to participate in Point of View's mission to restore America's godly heritage and a Christian worldview in this nation by joining the Truth Team. But you don't have to wait to make a difference. You can make a donation right now and learn more about the Truth Team by visiting us online at pointofview.net. or by calling 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Kelly Shackelford, Merrill Matthews, and one of the articles we have posted for you comes from the New York Times. And I was last night getting a chance to listen to a New York Times columnist who is a conservative, but this one is Ezra Klein. He's an individual that does a podcast, The Ezra Klein Show. He's author of the book, We're Polarized. He would refer to himself as left of center, but Merrill Matthews, he says, Charlie Kirk was practicing politics the right way. And I think it illustrates that though this article came out, I think it was very well written. He has been pilloried. He has been criticized. There's been calls for him to be pulled from the editorial staff. And he says, you can dislike much of what Kirk believed, and the following statement is still true. Kirk was practicing politics in exactly the right way. He was showing up to the campuses and talking with anyone who would talk to him. And he points out the fact that we may have disagreed, but we agreed on one thing, and that is that we still believe there is a possibility for America. And it's a very good piece, which I would encourage people to read. And here's a good example where if you're a liberal and even say something somewhat nice about Charlie Kirk, oh my goodness, the criticism you receive.
And Ezra Klein got it exactly right. He's a columnist. He works in the world of ideas, and people working in the world of ideas, if you're like this, if you do this right, you debate with other people. I love getting the opportunity to go to a campus where I'm in enemy territory or because if people here normally would disagree with me, I think it's a great venue to be able to talk to them and have fun with them, sort of be kind of humorous there and open it up to a discussion so that we're humans out here taking different positions. And Ezra Klein is talking about that. And this is where one of the real tragedies of American history, America has come right now, is that especially the left, to some extent on the right, but especially the left, has just cannot accept the notion that people on the right have important ideas, have values, and are concerned about the country just as they are.
Yeah, we're watching it, right? We're watching it all play out. We're watching all these statements, all these people. The Kimmel deal where he's making something up that's just not true. And it's obvious they have a problem. Again, everybody's mother taught them, somebody dies, even if they're not good people, you don't say anything. That's just kind of basic manners. Turns out Charlie Kirk was a strong believer, was actually very gracious to people, changed a lot of people's lives in a very positive way. And yet, this is the way they react. But it's really consistent with what we've been dealing with for, I don't know how many years. And we've come in here and said it. We come in, on the political side, Trump will take a 90-10 issue or an 85-15 issue, like no men and women sports, and they'll just go crazy on the other side. And it's like they're culling their own herd. They're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And as they do, they get more and more extreme. And this is the ultimate, right? Sort of celebrating violence against free speech. And so it's just more of what we've seen. It's not logical. It's very dumb. Dumb politically too. And so we see more and more of it. Now, I think this is turning the other direction now, right? I think
it is.
I think this will help people say, we're going to stand for free speech. At a time when most young people think that hateful speech it's appropriate. This is a majority of younger people. It's appropriate to respond with violence. Mm-hmm. How can you even have a poll come back like that?
I just read that the other day.
I think their minds are changing now.
That might help.
And to the point of celebrating, as Mangione, the person who assassinated the CEO of United Health, gets sort of put in hero status for what he did, even though he came up and someone from the rear and shot somebody in the back. And on the other side, since Ezra Klein talked about one person who was on the right who was doing it right, I disagree with almost everything Bernie Sanders says. But Bernie Sanders goes out and he engages in debate. He'll go to places and talk about his ideas. He's a very vociferous advocate for what he wants, what he believes in, and I disagree with him. But he'll debate people and he'll talk about ideas and he'll push his ideas, and he can be kind of strong in that. But he engages in the debate. So that's what we want to be doing, is talking about these things, having a debate about them, and then ultimately the public gets to decide.
Might be that we're accidentally restoring free speech in the younger generation. I mean, in this process,
and we need to,
because they had kind of lost it. The idea there's just a lack of appreciation for basic principles, and this is part of which I know we'll get to later. This coalition that I was in D.C. with this week with the Secretary of Education.
Yeah.
Is this? It really goes back, and Americans get this: is we're not teaching history and civics of what our country is in the schools, and so you've got this pretty significant percentage of people that do that. This is in the polling. I think it was 41% do not love America. It's because they don't know what America is. They don't even know what their rights are, and we saw this from Senator Kaine just a week or so ago, right? The witness says our liberties come from God and no government can take it away. And his response is that he found that terrifying, that's like something from Iran. And you're like, no, that's in the Declaration of Independence.
And you're a senator from Virginia, where Thomas Jefferson from Virginia wrote it.
And so, I mean, gosh, if our U.S. senators don't even know the most basic things, it shows you. And I think the polling showed it was 70. It was either 71 or 73% of parents said that they're not teaching American history in our schools. And it should be in every grade. We should be teaching people about the government. It was a large percentage, over 70%, of Americans who could not tell you the three branches of government.
Right.
So the America 250 Civics Coalition is the Secretary of Education, which she's hoping will be the last one, which we could talk about too. But and groups from across the country, and really the purpose is during the 250th year, for us as a coalition to really bring things together and to do a tour around the country, to have people lecturing, giving lectures at the colleges, to be doing awards in the different states, to be doing teacher symposiums, and to really get back to let's teach our young people what freedoms they have, what the Constitution says, what is the basis of our country. And I think it's going to be a great year.
I think so.
There's going to be a lot of materials available, and I think a lot of education. So it's certainly an honor to be a part of that coalition.
Let's talk about those materials, because, again, if you are one of those individuals, next week we'll be talking about the Truth Team. You already have received this booklet on One Nation Under God. The one coming out next is on the Bill of Rights, and you can see that our banner there is 250 Years Restoring America's Godly Heritage. And I thought, in some respects, that all ties into the National Religious Liberty Commission. And, Kelly, a week ago we talked about the fact that you convened that at the Museum of the Bible. Then we talked about some of your own clients were called up there to speak. And I don't know too many 12-year-olds that would be as articulate as that young man, but talk about what happened there, because that's another very exciting trend.
Well, I encourage people to go and watch the hearing. It's online. Just look Religious Liberty Commission hearing 2. And there's 2 parts to it, part 1 and part 2. And the president showed up, which obviously got a lot of attention.
Yes.
And unbeknownst to anybody, really, I mean, he called out 2 people. We had a lot of people that were going to be testifying that day, students who had their religious freedom violated. And he mentioned 2 of them, and they happened to be both our clients in different cases. But the young man that he called up to actually come up and say a few words was a little 12-year-old boy. And, they had to get a stool so you could even see him over the podium. And how many people speak with the presidential seal in front of them? Pretty much nobody, right? This little guy did it. And, oh, my gosh, it was like the speech from a professional 50 to 60-year-old or something. It was unbelievable. And I have that link. It's on my X and all that, but it's also at First Liberty. You can find it.
Right.
I just can't encourage you enough. Go watch his testimony. He and his mom's testimony later about his situation, where basically it's not basically, the school required all the fifth graders to really try to corrupt their kindergarten buddy, forcing them to read this book and question their gender. And this guy's saying, I felt horrible that I was subjecting my kindergarten buddy to this, but it was required. And he stood up, and the result was, instead of the grown-ups going, oh, okay, we'll give you an exemption or whatever, they did a Pink Out the Hate Day so that everybody in the school would bully this kid. It's just an incredible story.
We will continue with that story right after these important messages.
It only takes a few minutes. Just watch an interaction between Charlie Kirk and a college student. You'll learn some good arguments on an important cultural issue, and you'll get a lesson in civil discourse done with excellence, mercy, and grace. Commentator Rod Dreher wrote of the late Charlie Kirk, "True, he could throw some rhetorical punches, but he always did so in the spirit of engaging his opponents, not seeking to humiliate or destroy them." He described Charlie as a man who did everything right, a cheerful young dude who thought the best way to advance his political ideas was through meeting the people and debating and discussing with them the issues of our time. And yet, on the night of Charlie's death from a gunshot by a radicalized 22-year-old, Fox News' Jesse Waters declared, "They took a shot at Charlie to tell you it's dangerous to speak your mind." So far, the message of intimidation articulated by Mr. Waters is not sinking in with the movement Charlie Kirk spawned through the organization he founded, Turning Point. We must pray that the young people he had such an impact on, whose hearts and thinking he sought to develop, will be strengthened to do what Charlie taught and modeled, that they will stand in faith and for faith, that they will defend the sanctity of human life and protect the unborn, that they will choose leaders who will act courageously to preserve a free and decent society, that they will marry, have children, and parent them well. Make no mistake, Charlie Kirk was a martyr for America, for free and open debate, and yes, for the cause of Christ. He knew the risks. He had a security team with him. He faced the danger because, as he told a questioning student, when people stop talking, that's when you get violence. The violence came. And so, we pray, does the courage. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, let me just mention real quickly that we do have some resources for you. Kelly Shackelford talked about one that you can find at firstliberty.org. First Liberty partners with U.S. Department of Education to launch America 250 Civics Education Coalition, and we are certainly dedicated to that, and I'll hold up some of the booklets that we have been making available and will continue to do so. But Kelly, we also have posted one of the press releases because it relates back to our conversation with Charlie Kirk, and that is Tennessee City denies request to host Charlie Charlie Kirk prayer vigil on public property. Okay, this is public property.
Yes.
There's
It's like a
the
park.
problem. Due to a local ordinance that prohibits individuals from actually engaging in political or religious activities, this was denied, and I think you had to explain that to them, didn't you?
Well, it's not over yet.
Yeah, I know.
We're still explaining it to them. We might have to have a federal judge explain it to them.
Here we go.
But, just what you said there, the ordinance specifically says, oh, yeah, you can use our property. You can put in for a permit and have a deal with the park or whatever, but not if it's religious or political. So,
First Amendment?
yeah, just kind of basic, I wonder
Free
what kind of
speech,
speech.
Religious liberty.
I wonder
Yeah.
what kind of speech the founders are trying to protect. You think, well, I guess political speech wasn't very important to them, or religious speech. This is
Amazing. Isn't it
it's
amazing?
incredible.
And we
but
didn't know it was there.
No.
Yeah.
And this is not in, New York City or what? It's in Tennessee.
Tennessee.
Yeah, it's Morristown. It's in Morristown, Tennessee. So hopefully they'll get their wits and do the right thing here. If not, we'll actually have, Charlie would probably like it. We'll have a lawsuit on his behalf, on behalf of the vigil and the folks there that are just trying to have a vigil honoring Charlie.
And again, we have seen, and I thought, let me go around the round table on that, because you probably have seen some of these memes out there where it'll say, here's what the world looked like after the death of George Floyd, and there's riots and everything, and here's what happened after the death of Charlie Kirk. Now, maybe it's a little bit overdone, but there is, I think, something to be said about that, because I am watching, not because I get on, but my kids, especially my daughters, get on TikTok all the time, and they're showing individuals that are saying, I'm not a Christian, but when I see how the Christians have reacted in such a positive way, when everybody was fearful that this was going to lead to a civil war, I began to rethink this. And I had one individual that I saw on TikTok had pulled out a Bible and reads from the Bible and has yet to even become a Christian. And we have, of course, talked about others that have been at these prayer vigils and others that have gone to church. I've seen some individuals say, I've been a Democrat all my life, but after seeing this reaction, I'm going to register as a Republican. Something's going on.
Yes, and it's upsetting independents too, and that's where elections are decided, is the independents, because so many of them have just sort of repelled against some of the things they're seeing with the progressive movement, especially as they move more towards a socialist and progressive movement. Democrats are risking their future by their movement right now, and I'm sure a lot of traditional Democrats are wondering, how can we stop this?
Yes.
But it doesn't seem to be stoppable right now.
Yeah, I wish everybody out there who hasn't watched Charlie on a campus, I wish they'd go and not an edited, but him actually having a discussion with somebody. I think most people are blown away when they do that. Not just because he's really gifted, which he is, but because of the way he does it, which is not hostile at all. It's very it's very accommodating. You have people that come up that are dressed like not like anything you'd want anybody to be dressed like, and he treats them very graciously. And the Christian emphasis in what he says is high. It's not like people tend to think it's like all political, or it's about trans issues or whatever. And people will ask those questions, but really, it's much more about his Christian faith and his beliefs than anything else. And so I would just encourage people, if they're coming to opinions about, Charlie, whatever they are, without actually watching these discussions, they ought to watch them. Watch a few. I think you'll be moved by what you're seeing, and you'll begin to understand what's going on in the younger generations right now, and that many of them were hungry because they were fed really a more secular diet, and they're now realizing that the Bible and going to church, and they're seeing the benefits, and it's starting to change a lot of lives. And so it's I think it's worth doing it. It doesn't. Everybody, most people listening to this play around with their social media some every day. Well, do a little of this, and don't look for the person that's trying to criticize and they're going to edit down a video or whatever. Look at an actual discussion, and ask yourself, how'd you do in that situation?
And one of the things Charlie did was it took us back to the past, because Kerby, you and I are older, and I remember in the 60s and 70s going to high school and college. Going to college, if somebody was giving a presentation, even if I didn't think I'd agree with that, I'd go and sit and listen to what the person had. You had this sort of respectful, oftentimes listening, sometimes debate, sometimes you get a little shouting in there, but you'd have people who were going and listening to what other people had to say to find out if they agreed with it, or they disagreed with it, and so forth. And it was a time of inquiry where we were looking to find out, what do we believe and how do we support what we believe? And Charlie did that, and we've lost that for the past 20 or 30 years in colleges.
And part of it was that you had the original kind of liberal idea. I've shared this before, that speaking on dozens and dozens of campuses before I've done this particular program, one of the things Probe did was go in there, and lots of times I'd have a professor say, now, I don't necessarily agree with Mr. Anderson from his Christian point of view, but you've had a chance to hear my view, so I wanted to give you a chance to hear his point of view. And I'd oftentimes get up there and say, your professor has paid you a high compliment that you can actually evaluate this and use your critical thinking to evaluate some of these ideas. But over time, in the 70s and 80s, there was an openness. It started getting really tight in the 90s, and that's when Dinesh D'Souza talked about this idea of closing down the campuses. And by the time you got to the 2000s, it was a very different world, and that's why in most of these cases, whether it is Charlie Kirk or whether it's Ben Shapiro or Michael Knowles, I can go through the long, long list, most of them speak outside of the classroom, either in an event or out there on the mall. And that's unfortunate, because the real damage sometimes is done in the classroom.
Yeah, and it's a shame right now. I mean, every person right now who's out there in public in a consistent way has to have all kinds of extra security now.
I know. I know.
And that's a shame. I'm hoping this over time this will actually change in the opposite direction. But people were banned if they came to the, some of the times the argument was given by the colleges that, we can't have this conservative person here to speak because, we can't guarantee their safety, is what they would say. And so they would just ban one side of all the arguments, which is kind of the opposite of what college is supposed to be about. And again, Charlie busted through that. And I think you're going to see a lot of people now going to campuses in his stead. And I think you're going to see, a lot of people that were influenced by him that will be those people. Yeah. And so it's a very different time in our country. What's just happened is, I think, clearly changing our country.
And I did see that just down the road is UT Arlington, and that's where they said it's kind of the heckler's veto. We just cannot guarantee your safety unless we charge you this much. Yep. And in that particular case, it was just a local chapter of Turning Point. They didn't have the financial resources, and so the threat enough was to cancel the event, which is really sad. Let's take a break. We have a lot more to cover. We'll be back right after this.
It was not that long ago that censorship appeared to be almost inevitable. Free speech was being attacked and strangled in many places. And some of us wondered if this was the end. But now, many feel a new sense of hope, a chance for a fresh dawn. Let me caution you, now is not the time to relax. It's a time to press forward, to use this fresh opportunity to proclaim and learn how to apply truth to current issues. By the fact you're here, listening right now, that tells me that you recognize the vital role Point of View plays as a voice of truth. For more than 50 years, we've informed and equipped people who have made a real difference. And when you give to Point of View today, you breathe life into what can be a new golden era for the truth. Please, take a moment right now and invest in truth. Visit pointofview.net or give it 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. Click in now or call 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just wanted to tell you, too, how much I have appreciated Point of View over the years. I've always been taught that we take care of our own, and I feel like Point of View is one of our own because of the Christian worldview that you do promote. And so I have become a partner today, and I just want to thank you so much, and just God bless you for all that you do.
Listen, I wanted to make a quick comment. I'm a relatively new listener to the show, and I really kind of stumbled upon it more than anything because I'm doing some driving now that I wasn't in the past. And my comment really is, I think you guys and gals are more right on about the assessment of this country right now than anything I've heard. You know, I go home and I tell my wife, you've got to hear what they're talking about on the show. It's just so right on. And I tell my parents the same thing.
I'm 25 years old, and I started listening to Point of View about 4 years ago, and it has changed the way that I think and the way that I view the world around me.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, if you would like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Some of you may have comments about Charlie Kirk. You may have comments about religious liberty. Or, of course, now you may have some comments about capitalism and socialism. I'll hold up our two booklets that we talked about just the other day, because we said that Dr. Matthews had recommended that we might have this article, which we do. Capitalism is out, socialism is in. So I did a little bit of teaching on capitalism and some of the socialist critiques of capitalism, and one on socialism. And those booklets, by the way, are still available. You can certainly write to get a printed copy, or you can simply go to the website, and there was a place where you could download a PDF of either of these. But Dr. Matthews, good example here, because Politico did a survey, no real surprise. The younger you are, the more likely you are to believe that socialism is superior to capitalism. And to be fair, I read off yesterday their definition of socialism, which frankly sounded a little good. In other words, they want to improve people's lives, but they do talk about more public ownership of key industries like housing, healthcare, and utilities, whereas capitalism wants lower taxes, oppose government regulations of business, and the rest. But whatever you look at, and I recognize that sometimes young people have a skewed view of this, still, 74% of likely Democrat voters said democratic socialism is closer to their viewpoint. So when people say, I don't know how we can elect a man by the name of Zohan Mamdani for mayor of New York City, I think we now know.
Yes, and Gallup follows up with a poll. They do this every year. And so the question they ask in the recent poll is, just off the top of your head, would you say you have a positive or negative image of the following? Capitalism. So Republicans since 2010 to 2025 have been roughly, I'd say 75%, went up to 80% for a little while there, and down about maybe 77, 78%. Independents dropped from 60% down to maybe 50%. Democrats on capitalism was about 50%, dropped down to just above 40%. And so when you're talking, and then when they ask the same question, just off the top of your head, would you say you have a positive or negative image of each of the following? And they say socialism. Well, Republicans were around 20% in 2010. They went down a little bit. Now it's still about maybe 17, 18%. Don't know what's wrong with them. Independents have it about, been roughly the same, around 40%. Democrats, it's gone from about 50% up to maybe 62, 63%. So wow. It's these are just Democrats and Republicans. So we're seeing a change here in the Democratic Party, as over 60% of the Democratic Party has a favorable view of socialism, and that's not just the young people.
It is amazing, and I wouldn't have predicted that, because when I wrote this booklet a while back, Arthur Brooks, who'd been on the program, says we, at that time, we're a 70-30 nation. 70% support capitalism, 30 do not. He says the good news, 70% actually believe we're better off in a free market society. The bad news, the other 30% are the people in control of the academy, media, and the government. So, but the numbers are very different. And Kelly, I just can't get my head around the fact that the center of business, center of commerce around the world is New York City, and we are seeing the citizens in New York City about ready to elect a Muslim Marxist individual who wants to do all sorts of things that are different than any mayor has ever done in that city.
Yeah, it is amazing. I mean, it's amazing. again, I think this is because this is coming from younger people.
Yes.
And this is because the lack of education they got. I mean, it's not hard to look at the other countries that have tried this approach. Doesn't work out too well. In fact, it results in incredible evil usually. But it's centralized control. Who wants centralized control? I mean, who wants the federal government controlling everything of your life right now? And they already are involved in way much more than they should be. But who wants that for a system? It's just crazy as you think through these. I mean, capitalism works because those who serve best are those who succeed. And then you give people their own freedom to try to do things. And I'll tell you, at the very center, though, of Marxism and of the United States of America's approach, which all been, is really a faith issue, because Marxism is atheism. It does not believe in God. In fact, Marx and Hegel and them were when I say do not believe, I'm being nice to them.
Virulent atheists.
And it's right in the center of their entire philosophy. It's evil. It came from the pit of hell, and that's why it results in so much great suffering and murder. And we can go through all the countries, and the only reason these young people are thinking it's great and that Mamdani is great is because they don't know history. They haven't been taught, and I hope, but it looks like they're going to have to learn it themselves. And that won't be very friendly. And so maybe this will be another example for the country to help educate people.
And the problem Democrats have is Zohan Mamdani, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders are the driving force.
Yes,
they're the leading speakers of the Democratic Party. They draw huge crowds. They get people excited. I see occasionally somebody will say, well, the Democrats just really don't have they have a leadership vacuum or something. Well, no, they actually have some leaders out there, and it's the most progressive part of the Democratic Party. And this has got to worry some of the more traditional Democrats, because the driving force is the progressive left, and that's moving them even further. And a lot of Democrats out here who are listening maybe are going to have to say, I'm going to either have to go with the progressive left or move to independent or Republican.
Yeah. And Kelly's talked about how it's shrinking more and more anyway, but you begin to think about the fact that it isn't just the leadership, although it's certainly that. I noticed the other day, as I mentioned, that Mamdani has not been supported so far by the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, although he's from New York, or by the House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, and he's from New York. But you did have the governor of the state of New York say, well, he's got some great energy, but then pointed out there are a lot of differences. So it's difficult right now to be a Democrat, especially a Democrat leader, and not be called upon to support Zoran Mamdani. But that's exactly what we find ourselves in right now.
I wouldn't. I certainly do not line up with the politics of Chuck Schumer or Jeffries. But why you see them not endorsing and why you see Hochul endorsing is because they are smart politicians.
Yes.
And so they know that if you attach yourself to Mamdani, then when everything starts to happen, you will be attached to Mamdani. And Kathy Hochul hadn't figured this out, but it's not going to go well. And, the idea of a government controlling all the grocery stores and all the other things he said, he's tried to retract his hatred for the police, but I don't think anybody really believes that. But, it's going to be fascinating to watch. I for the sake of those in New York, I hope he doesn't succeed, but I think it's highly likely he will.
The interesting thing is these aren't poor people. The poor people are supporting Donald Trump. These are middle class and upper middle class income who have shifted to the socialism motion.
And again, some of that could be because they have felt that the society's left them behind. But we'll come back and talk about that because it gets us into the whole issue of Gen Z. We'll talk about that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Lots of myths around the millennial generation. We even spend some time on radio during our Millennial Roundtable debunking many of them. Perhaps the most significant prevailing myth is that millennials are broke. Sociologist Jean Twenge takes on the myth of the broke millennial in her extensive article in The Atlantic. This isn't just a myth that others have about the generation, it is a myth they have about themselves. One author complains about their plight in her book, Okay, Boomers, Let's Talk, How My Generation Got Left Behind. She says her generation is responding with desperation and sometimes anger. Now, to her surprise, Jean Twenge responds, millennials as a group are not broke. They are, in fact, thriving economically. That wasn't true a decade ago, and prosperity within the generation today is not evenly shared. But since the mid-2010s, millennials on a whole have made a breathtaking financial comeback. The Great Recession 2008 was hard on American incomes, especially young millennials who were just entering the job market. But the millennial income rebound has been both broad and steep. Two groups that have not done well are men and people with less education. Millennial men have not seen their income increases that millennial women enjoy, in part because of a gap in educational attainment. That points to the other gap, the income gap between millennials with a college degree and those with only a high school degree. In one of his commentaries, John Stonestreet explains that the true crisis for millennials isn't a financial one, it's a crisis of meaning and purpose. Once again, this is where the gospel provides the answer. The Bible provides a true foundation for meaning and purpose. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Inflation, go to viewpoints.info/inflation. That's viewpoints.info/inflation. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, we'll get into some other issues in just a minute, but since we've been talking about this idea of capitalism and socialism, it first of all relates very much to what I'll hold up here for those of you watching online, and that is our upcoming issue. It's the October issue, Reaching Gen Z. One of the articles there by Tanita Maddox, who interestingly enough has worked with, of course, Young Life for years and began to think maybe I'm just getting too old, and she's younger than I am by a lot of years, but began to see that Gen Z is very different. Of course, I have an article in there about the anxious generation, which is really pulling together some of the material from Jonathan Haidt. And then we also have a piece that Liberty McCarter has done as well, Know Why God is Good. And of course, I might mention her Know Why podcast. But there is a very good reason why the younger generation does not like capitalism. I think they're rejecting capitalism that is crony capitalism, maybe not even a free market, one that is very easily manipulated. But they're also, I think, legitimately reacting that ever since we went off the gold standard in 1971, there was no longer a tide to the dollars. And so as a result, we printed more dollars. It was easy to print more dollars. And so when you print more dollars with inflation, any asset begins to appreciate. But the wages don't keep up with that. And so the gap gets worse and worse. And so, Kelly, again, we can talk about the fact that we have a generation, for example, that says when they were Generation X, they could still afford a home, but maybe mom and dad had to work. By the time you get to Generation Y, some of them aren't sure they'll get into a home until maybe they'll get married later and maybe get into a home later. By the time you get to Generation Z, they think the chances of getting a home are about the same as the chance of getting Social Security, which are less than the chances of seeing a UFO. And this is the kind of concern that then people like certainly Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And the other day, Elizabeth Warren was talking about the fact that this is an affordability crisis. And we have a whole generation saying, I just can barely afford food and gas. And so there's just a real concern on the younger generation. I believe there are answers, but you have to admit there's a problem before you can start talking about the answers.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that Charlie Kirk talked about before anybody else was talking about it. He was talking about the people he knew that went to college. He didn't go to college, if you'll remember. He was advised not to. He didn't need it. And he watched his friends go amass massive debt, get out, have a hard time getting jobs, not getting jobs that could even pay off the debt. And then they're looking at housing, and there's just no way to, afford a house. So I know back when I got out of school and got married and law school, so it was, school and law school and all that, all those years, the housing market was, the way it worked financially is you could buy a house very safely as long as it was no more than 2.5 times your income.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't a problem for a 20-something-year-old. I mean, that is not possible in almost anywhere in this country for current 20-year-olds. And so that is really tough. What if you're married? What are you supposed to do? And their dream is having a home, having a family. And so, and then meanwhile, they've just been told, hey, do this college thing and rack up, $500,000 of debt. And Charlie was saying these people are angry. And that's where I think the core of this is.
Sure.
And we need to talk about solutions for them. And I know the good thing about the free market economy is people are trying to fill that gap. They're trying to find ways to get them into something. Maybe it's not a full house. Maybe it's a smaller house. There's all kinds of different things that home builders and others are doing. But and then add to that the interest rate was way down at 3%, and now it popped up. I mean, they got the golden handcuffs on now.
They do.
Because they can't leave.
And I also saw there was a mindset for a while, I don't know if it's still pervasive, where younger people said, we don't really want to own anything. They wanted to rent things. They wanted to rent the apartment. They wanted to rent the furniture in the apartment. They wanted to rent their clothes they were wearing. It was interesting that they felt like if I don't own anything, I'm free to be able to move and change and other things. But you also don't build up any assets, and you have to keep spending money for things. And now you don't have one of the things that we tried to do as a family is to get enough money to pay that down payment for that first down payment. But it meant you had to save, and that meant you had to forego certain things that you wanted to spend money on now in order to be able to do that then. And I don't know that we have a saving culture among young people these days.
Well, and one of the things that we have talked about before is Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum has talked about that. You've done an interview with an individual that says, again, that you will always rent. And so, again, we've sort of turned into a nation of renters. And I think some of that may be turning around because some of these homes are not owned by homeowners. They're owned by BlackRock or Fidelity or whatever.
That's a problem.
As investments. Well, now as we start seeing, as I mentioned the other day, we have 3 times as many people trying to sell homes as buy them. Maybe the price will go down and they'll want to invest in other things, stocks, Bitcoin, whatever it might be. So that will free up, maybe lower the price of the homes. That would be very helpful for Generation Y and Z. The other issue is, and this gets down to something you and I talk about all the time, the Federal Reserve. The other day we did see a drop in the interest rates. Okay, 25 basis points, just a blip blip, but every drop in the interest rates, first of all, mean we don't have to pay so much for our national debt, but also means it might get just a little bit easier for somebody to get into a home.
Right. And they held the option open that they might be doing, there's an expectation they'll do 2 more drops. And if inflation doesn't go up significantly over the next few months, we may get 2 more decreases before the end of the year, which would be helpful from that standpoint. I know Donald Trump would be happy with that, but the Fed has been in a tough position because of the tariffs and other things. Are they going to increase inflation? And then at the same time, we want to be able to get that cost of money down so that it helps with the federal budget and other things.
I might just quote Glenn Beck for just a minute, because in his book, he talks about the fact that after decades of home ownership being an essential part of life in America, a trend has developed that's transforming the United States into a nation of renters. And when you look, Kelly, at the median family income, and then you look at the median house price, you're pricing out almost 2/3 of individuals. Now, we've also, many times, you and I and Penn Dexter and others have talked about the fact that people are having fewer children. But again, it's harder to raise a family in an apartment than it is in a home. And so, again, it's hard to explain that we are actually having a fertility crisis if you look at some of our church nurseries these days. But the churches are the exception. By and large, we're lowering that. And so all of these sort of come together. The economics, politics, and culture all come together, don't they?
They do. And this is why I think, we're in a lot of trouble, except for the fact of this great awakening that's occurring in younger people. Going back to church, what Charlie was all about. I mean, one of the things Charlie did is give the advice that, 60 and 70-year-olds used to be the ones to give, right?
Yeah.
He told her, get married early, have children, have a family. What 20-something-year-old or, by the time he passed away, 31, what person is giving that advice? But every one of those college students, that's what he's telling them.
That's right.
And so that's hard to do when you can't afford a home, when you can't. I mean, that's the difficulty. But this resurgence, back into church and into reading the Bible and all that could turn this all around. And that there's hope for what you're seeing. It's been a lot of hopeless looking, and I think now they're getting their hope restored. And with the right thing, not with a free house, but with a relationship with the Lord. It
is interesting that Frank Turek has been on the program with us, and Alex McFarland, and both of them had been with Charlie recently. And one of the things Charlie Kirk said is, I got to talk about the politics thing because that's still in the news, but really I just want to talk about Jesus. And of course, if people do watch the funeral on Sunday, they will hear what he called America's pastor. Now, the individual is very humble and says, I'm not America's pastor, but he was the pastor to Charlie Kirk, and he says, at least for 11 minutes, I will be America's pastor, and that will be a chance to once again hear a very good message and an evangelistic message as well. So we come back and take a break. A couple things. The FCC and Jimmy Kimmel and Disney, I thought it would be worth getting into for just a minute, but also a very good piece on the left's lack of knowledge. This is very interesting because it has been illustrative by some of the facts that we have already put on the table, but you'll certainly appreciate that. Of course, Penn Dexter's commentary today is on Charlie Kirk. And before we're done, I think Kelly will give us a few more prayer targets for what we need to be praying about in terms of this issue of religious liberty. But let's take a break. You can find all the articles we're talking about today on the website at pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
As you likely know, our nation is approaching its 250th anniversary. And at Point of View, we are on a mission to restore America's godly heritage. But we do need your help. The first step in restoring America's godly heritage is educating people about the biblical truth that shaped our nation, including the truth that God is our creator and the source of our rights. The truth that people, including those in government, are prone to sin, and the truth that freedom requires internal moral guidance, which comes from belief in God. Point of View educates listeners on these truths every day, but we need support from people like you in order to operate. The best way to join in our mission to restore America's godly heritage is by joining the Truth Team. Learn more at pointofview.net, or you can call us at 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again
is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, let's take some phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. Kelly Shackelford, Merrill Matthews. But let's go first to California, KNLB, and Kathy. Thank you for joining today.
Yes, I have two things that I would like to bring out, and I don't know if they're right, but one of them is we had a generation that everybody was a winner. And through that, because everybody was a winner, nobody would be, you couldn't hurt their feelings by saying, no, that's not correct. It's like misguided. And that was being taught through the elementary, and I don't know about colleges. But the thing is with that mind thought, that's kind of like a generation of kids who, when you tell them no, like Dr. Spock, you should allow your children to feel whatever it is, and you shouldn't stop them from that feeling, whether it was right or wrong.
Yeah.
And then the other one is on the economy. Then they come out with, you will own nothing and you will be happy. But the problem with that, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, life and liberty meaning slavery. If you own nothing, you would basically be liberated, which is a communist way of thinking.
Yep. And again, if you don't have property, of course, that's the idea. You don't have to own property because abolition of property. That first point she was making fits very much with Jonathan Haidt, who we're going to quote in just a minute, because he's been on the program talking about the coddling of the American mind and this idea that if indeed words could hurt you, words are violence, well, then violence is justified in challenging words, and you have trigger warnings and safe spaces and all that, right?
And she makes a good point that we went through a phase, I don't know if we're still in it or not, where all the kids are winners. Yeah. Can't have a winner and a loser. And if you have a loser, it would be terrible for their mindset, so we can't have a loser. So you've got to have all winners. And that always bothered me because it just felt like, but if everybody's a winner, then nobody's a winner.
Yes. Well said. And it just brings us into all these other issues. Let me just mention real quickly that I did mention Jonathan Haidt in one of our other articles talks about the left's vast lack of knowledge. And I thought I would mention it because in the second page, he says that I was always concerned about whether or not liberals knew conservatives and conservatives knew liberals. And somebody suggested this book, and I'll hold that up. It's Jonathan Haidt's book on the righteous mind, in which they've done some pretty empirical studies, which makes sense. And that is oftentimes conservatives know liberals because they live in a liberal world. They go to a university and oftentimes they hear a liberal point of view. They turn on legacy media. They hear that liberal point of view. So they ask conservatives to express how liberals would see an issue, and they were pretty accurate. But then when they asked liberals to explain what a conservative was, they didn't have a clue. And this particular article is a reminder of, once again, yes, we all live in our silos, but the silos and the bubble around liberals is pretty significant, and maybe one of the reasons why they are so resistant to saying maybe we shouldn't elect a Marxist as the next mayor of New York City.
Yeah, they... it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense, and it's hard to debate with somebody who doesn't know anything. They don't know what you believe.
They don't
even know what they believe. Yes. Really, they know the conclusion.
Yeah.
But I think part of the book is that they don't read to understand the differences. So. That's, I think, what leads to these responses of not wanting to debate because they feel like they're unarmed. And so what they need to do is shut down the debate and shut down the debater and cancel people and all this from the discussion. And so it brings, some light to the fact. And Jonathan Haidt is not like a Christian.
No, he's just the opposite.
So it's
when we had him on,
real
it was
data.
a bit risky because he popped off with some things every once in a while. Yeah, but here's a good example. You've shared with me before that you read kind of the summary of the New York Times. Dr. Merrill Matthews is always quoting NPR. We live in that world, but the other individuals maybe have never gone to a conservative podcast, never maybe watched Fox News, certainly have never been inside a church. So the difference between conservatives and liberals is even greater, the difference between atheists and Christians. And that's, I think, part of the problem, isn't it?
It is, because and the educational system just simply has not kept up to help people understand this. And that's true of K through 12. It's also true of college, that people don't come to things and understand the other side. One time when I used to teach philosophy, and I'd have people come in, and one day I'd have them come in. It's a surprise. All right, how many people are going to believe in God? How many don't? They had to have a debate. Next time they came in, I had them reverse it. Not because we people who believe in God want to be supporting atheism, but you got to look at what the arguments are and then try to make a case for that so that you understand what the other person believes.
Perfect setup for our next phone call here in South Carolina on the Good News Network. I think, Watson, you want to talk about what's going on in higher education.
I do, and I appreciate you taking my call. Mr. Shackelford, Dr. Matthews, and Mr. Anderson, thank you so much for your ministry, all the truth that you guys do. I'm a local church pastor. I utilize the booklets, the magazines. I have a table set up, and, of course, for church members to access. So I encourage all the listeners, if they're not a Truth Team member, to go ahead and join and get those wonderful resources. All I want to just say that, you guys were talking about the college, the lies, the myth, I guess I should say. I remember when I was in high school, this is in the 90s, basically the impression I was given is that unless you go to four-year university, you're going to not amount to anything. And, of course, I graduated from four-year university, and, I'm making $8.50 an hour at a warehouse, and the friend of mine that went to the technical school, $75,000 a year, God had plans for me, obviously, went on to seminary and so forth. But and I also taught. I taught U.S. history at Christian school here in South Carolina. And I told those kids, I said, listen, college is a tool. And if you don't know how to use that tool, it's not going to do you any good. And I encourage them, hey, if you feel the Lord leading you to college, go ahead. But there's other avenues as well. So be smart, know how to use that tool. So.
And again, think of micro, dirty jobs and everything like that. Just a number of individuals that have gone to trade schools and actually have done a lot better financially by not going to college.
And you don't have to go to college to keep learning.
Yeah.
I mean, I listen. R.C. Sproul does a history of philosophy, which I listened to the other day. It's done very, very well. It's several CD disc, and you can take those things and you can listen to those, and you can become very educated even if you don't go to college, and you can have the responses that you might have gotten if you went to college. But if you went to college, you may have never learned those things.
That's part of the problem. There are times when I've heard certainly Charlie Kirk say something, and I think, okay, when I was 31, I just finished from both Yale and Georgetown, but still I'd studied some of that. But a lot of the things he would say, I read later on in my life.
Right.
And there's a sense in which, Kelly, you're right, so much of that was front-loaded. What did I know at the age of 31? Because I think that's about the time when Marlon had me come on the program. But just, again, how he illustrates that instead of 4 years of college, spend that same 4 years reading some of the great books of the Western world, or even spending time in God's Word, and you're going to be a lot better off.
Yeah, and that's one of the things Charlie did, is he read every day.
Yeah.
He considered it part of kind of his job is to be educated, and so he read a lot more than a college student reads, for sure. And it was, I think that's important. I mean, I know some people who, like I'm thinking of a guy right now who's got a plumbing company, and he's built that up to where he's like I don't know what you call somebody. He's very successful.
Yes.
Okay. And those jobs are
master plumber
are great jobs.
Yes.
And yet, you don't have to go and rack up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt to do that, and you can have a great life. So So those options need to be on the table. People need to do what they're gifted to do and what the Lord allows for them to do.
And you can listen to CDs as you're going from one job to the other. But the other point is, don't just read conservatives. Read what the other side says.
I think so. I've got a couple of announcements when we come back, and certainly we'll give you some prayer requests because, indeed, we, of course, have our particular Pray for America this week. Of course, it was on Charlie Kirk, but we also, of course, have some action items that we want to give to you. So stay tuned. We'll get back to all of those. But many of these articles you might like to read. This is one of your reading list, and you might want to spend some of it over the weekend reading through. But you will find some of these you may want to pass on to others, including to maybe some of your kids and grandkids. Let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
It only takes a few minutes. Just watch an interaction between Charlie Kirk and a college student. You'll learn some good arguments on an important cultural issue, and you'll get a lesson in civil discourse done with excellence, mercy, and grace. Commentator Rod Dreher wrote of the late Charlie Kirk, "True, he could throw some rhetorical punches, but he always did so in the spirit of engaging his opponents, not seeking to humiliate or destroy them." He described Charlie as a man who did everything right, a cheerful young dude who thought the best way to advance his political ideas was through meeting the people and debating and discussing with them the issues of our time. And yet, on the night of Charlie's death from a gunshot by a radicalized 22-year-old, Fox News' Jesse Waters declared, "They took a shot at Charlie to tell you it's dangerous to speak your mind." So far, the message of intimidation articulated by Mr. Waters is not sinking in with the movement Charlie Kirk spawned through the organization he founded, Turning Point. We must pray that the young people he had such an impact on, whose hearts and thinking he sought to develop, will be strengthened to do what Charlie taught and modeled, that they will stand in faith and for faith, that they will defend the sanctity of human life and protect the unborn, that they will choose leaders who will act courageously to preserve a free and decent society, that they will marry, have children, and parent them well. Make no mistake, Charlie Kirk was a martyr for America, for free and open debate, and yes, for the cause of Christ. He knew the risks. He had a security team with him. He faced the danger because, as he told a questioning student, when people stop talking, that's when you get violence. The violence came. And so, we pray, does the courage. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. Let me do a couple of quick mentions, which next week we can get into in more detail. But this one was a shocker. The Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman, that's Charles Grassley, revealed that under the deep state, under President Joe Biden's administration, they targeted more than 90 Republican leaders and organizations, and one of those was Turning Point USA and Turning Point Action, which, of course, the organization is under Charlie Kirk. It was called Arctic Frost. It was an FBI case that was opened and approved by anti-Trump FBI agent, and I won't mention his name. Arctic Frost became Jack Smith's elector case against Trump. You saw that. These new records show show that Arctic frost was much broader than just an electoral matter. In other words, Arctic frost wasn't just a case to politically investigate Trump. It was a vehicle by which partisan FBI agents and DOJ prosecutors could improperly investigate the entire Republican political apparatus. That is, I think, Kelly Shackelford, one of the reasons why we do say elections have consequences.
Yeah, but that should not be happening under any winner of any election. I mean, this is what turns you into a banana republic. And this has got to stop. This has got to be dealt with so that it can't happen again. It's horrible. I mean, when you start weaponizing the government against political candidates and political parties, you're in real danger as a country. And so I hope that obviously this has been exposed, but what are they going to do about it?
Yeah, what are you going to do about it?
And that's going to be important to put in some safeguards.
Well, it's absolutely right. And what you don't want either side doing that. And the tendency can be if one side did it, then we'll do it again. And that's where you don't want to get that going. Yeah. You'd like to be able to say, that side did it, it stops here.
Yeah. Well, one of the other questions people have is, did the FCC have any influence on the firing of Jimmy Kimmel? Because there was a conversation the other day, which was from the FCC commissioner, Brendan Carr, who basically was talking to Disney and basically said, we can do it the easy way or the hard way. Now, I think Disney has been wanting to cancel the show for some time. It has been doing poorly, and that's an understatement compared to even Stephen Colbert. And yet, once he started coming into this whole last season of just an anti-Trump diatribe every day, and then just actually making statements that are factually incorrect, I guess that gave them enough cover, if you will, to cancel Jimmy Kimmel. But again, Dr. Matthews, we're not talking about free speech. Jimmy Kimmel's free to say whatever he wants. He's probably going to be on Stephen Colbert's show pretty soon here and say all that he wants to say. He might even get another gig, but that doesn't mean that a private company can't decide whether or not they want to keep losing money.
I think ABC should have ended that relationship a long time ago, because so many of these, it's true of all three of the major late night programs. They've been losing audience share for years, and they're not making any money. Stephen Colbert was apparently costing CBS, I guess, $40 million. I mean, they were losing $40 million a year, so they decided we were going to end that at the end of his contract. I suspect that Jimmy Kimmel was costing something along that lines. So ABC should have made that as a business decision. I'm less comfortable with the FCC coming up and saying, we can do this the easy way or the hard way.
Sounds like a mob boss.
But having said that, as we mentioned earlier, during the Biden administration, you had political Biden administration people going by to social media saying, we want to encourage you to stop some of these conservative posts, to take them off. And encourage might be a polite way of saying it, because I suspect in some ways it was, or things could get worse for you. So it really happened under the Biden administration. We're seeing some of this in the Trump administration. I'd like to see that stop, because I don't want the government out there doing that.
Again, Disney did fire an actress during The Mandalorian because she made some comments that weren't politically correct. NBC pushed out Megyn Kelly for some comments they didn't like. And, of course, you have the Biden administration urging the tech platforms to censor any views on COVID and on and on. So this has been going on for some time. It's just because one side does it doesn't mean the other side should do it. But at the same time, you do understand some of the motivation. That's why we don't want either government agency, whether under Republicans or Democrats, to have too much power. This cancel culture, it goes both ways. And all of a sudden, when liberals get canceled, they go, wait a minute. We've been telling you that for some time.
And one of the things you might cancel is the FCC. I mean, I'm not sure it's needed these days where you've got so much competition out there.
I think that's, and I won't spend a lot of time on that, but it was based on the idea of spectrum scarcity. Right. Because when you only had broadcast, you only had ABC ABC, NBC, and CBS, and maybe a little bit other, but other than that. But now with cable, you really don't need
I
this.
know, you don't.
I mean, and so before we're all through, I think around the table we're going to get rid of the Department of Education and the FCC. Who knows what else we'll get rid of and save some of the costs. Kelly, just before we go, I just always like to end with some prayer targets. And, of course, one of those is to pray for Turning Point USA. My wife was in correspondence with one of the individuals there that works at Turning Point. We've known the CEO of the Turning Point education area. He's actually a good friend, and we've known him for many years, and was talking with the wife about that, and certainly be praying for them, especially during the funeral this weekend. And we are Pray for America, but there's some really important prayer targets right now for First Liberty, aren't there?
Yeah, number one, we've got a case at the Supreme Court. I mean, it's really the first case in I don't know how many decades over the right to share the gospel in a public park. And our briefs were just submitted, so clerks and justices are starting to read. They're going to get the other side's briefs. I mean, just be praying for that whole process. We've got 2 more cases sitting up there that they might take. That'll be pretty significant, too. So pray for the Supreme Court and what we're doing there. Pray for our work on judges. There's a high-level judge right now that's been nominated that many conservative groups have said does not have the sufficient proof of any record of really having the right philosophy or mindset, and they're very concerned. And so those things are very difficult. A lot of politics that go on in those, and just pray for everybody's not physical safety, but safety in the process, that even people on opposite sides can be, handle themselves well. And then I'd say pray for the Religious Liberty Commission. This was never been one before in the history of our country. These hearings are really powerful. People should watch if they haven't. The next hearing is a week from Monday, and I think will be really powerful as well. There's going to be a tribute to Charlie Kirk, and there's going to be some people with Turning Point. There's also going to be some incredible speakers and also some great witnesses on coaches and their faith and their freedom, on teachers and our schools and their religious freedom, and then on just even Christian schools and private schools and their right to run their school according to their faith. There's lots of attacks on that. We're going to have that whole all those issues really hashed out. So I would just say pray for the commission, because our job is to, at the end of this, is to give direct recommendations to the president on how to advance and secure religious freedom for the future.
I might just mention again, you can go to firstliberty.org, click on Kelly's picture, or again, scroll down, you'll find some of that material. Let me just mention real quickly that next week is our Truth Team. We're going to have Lathan Watts, Walker Wildman, Bunny Pounds, Gary Bauer, Jonathan Teague, Don Blythe, Mike Ferris, and then, of course, Kelly and Liberty will be with us on our Friday. So it's going to be a great opportunity to, first of all, educate you about some of these important issues, but also to challenge you to join with us. And again, as you join with us, you'll receive the Outlook magazine for your financial gift. But also, of course, if you join at the level of $1 a day or more, $30 a month, $360 a year or more, you'll receive those booklets we've been talking about there as well. So some great opportunities. Again, Dr. Matthews, thank you for covering for me last week. It's always great to hear you on the program. And in a few weeks, people are going to be hearing you once again, because I'll be doing some traveling. So again, want to thank both Megans for their help engineering the program. Steve, thank you for producing the program. Enjoy the weekend. Maybe watch a little bit of football. We'll see you back here on Monday.
It was not that long ago that censorship appeared to be almost inevitable. Free speech was being attacked and strangled in many places. And some of us wondered if this was the end. But now, many feel a new sense of hope, a chance for a fresh dawn. Let me caution you, now is not the time to relax. It's a time to press forward, to use this fresh opportunity to proclaim and learn how to apply truth to current issues. By the fact you're here, listening right now, that tells me that you recognize the vital role Point of View plays as a voice of truth. For more than 50 years, we've informed and equipped people who have made a real difference. And when you give to Point of View today, you breathe life into what can be a new golden era for the truth. Please, take a moment right now and invest in truth. Visit pointofview.net or give at 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. Click in now or call 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.